Divorce isn't just the end of the relationship. It's the moment you realize you've been running the same patterns your whole life. The question is, do you break them or repeat them? Today I'm talking with Scott Powers, a relationship coach who's been through it himself. After 2 marriages, he started to look at why relationships fail and why we keep falling into the same traps over and over again. Now he helps couples to break free from the relationship patterns they inherited and build something better. We're going to talk about the biggest blind spots men have after a divorce, why avoiding conflict is a trap, and how to stop choosing the same partner over and over again. If you've ever felt stuck in the same relationship cycle, hang out for this one. Scott, welcome.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You've been through divorce yourself. What's the mistake you see a lot of men making over and over again?
Yeah, I think there's a group of men that have been modeled to be good guys, nice guys, and fall into the trap of, hey, they're probably great providers. They try to do all the things, but there's along the way, they sort of lose themselves. And a lot of it is in avoiding conflict. There's a trap there. You'd mentioned at the very beginning, Jeff, avoiding conflict and also giving away a lot of their selves and their power in the relationship. And they get caught feeling like, well, I've given everything and there's almost like nothing left. And I still can't win in this relationship. I'm not getting the love or respect I feel I deserve. And there's, sometimes just two good people who remain stuck in disconnection. And I think in our society, we see more and more of that today, of two people who are together and just really unhappy and not knowing how to break free from that.
You said a lot there, and I want to unpack some of that. I was furiously scribbling notes as you were talking. What's a nice guy, first of all?
Yeah, I think someone who is trying to make everyone else happy, sometimes at the expense of themselves. And listen, I'll model it for myself on my own experience of the type of person that I want to make everyone around me feel good, be happy. Even I'll sacrifice my own happiness so they could be happy. I think in the past, the challenge with that is, again, we give up ourselves, but we're also not getting to what the other person might really want. We're giving them what they think they want, in a sense. And maybe that's been communicated, maybe not. But we're constantly on our tiptoes or walking on eggshells for an illusion of happiness, avoiding the hard conversations, avoiding the conflict. So we put ourselves in a corner of living a life that's maybe inauthentic and chasing sort of like this illusion of happiness. If that makes sense?
It seems like there's kind of 3 settings here. You put everybody else before you. You put yourself way above everybody else, and then you put yourself first, but with consideration to everybody else. And I imagine one's almost narcissistic, one is low self-esteem, and then the other one's assertive.
Yeah. I mean, speaking to that one piece of that low self-esteem, I think there's an element here of when we don't get that love and respect from the woman we love. There's a chipping away of our esteem over time. Then we feel like we're playing catch up or desperation. Like, I have to make this person happy because that reflects back on me and my own self-esteem. So I feel like when we examine some of these relationships, right, it's a slow cutting away of that esteem and feeling of like, I cannot make my woman happy. I can't make my wife happy. And the world starts shrinking down because if you can't do that, what does that say about you as a person or as a man? And then there's that need of that. We see the man who suddenly becomes desperate, right? I'm going to go out and do the big thing, like buy the flowers. And, it's all this desperate attempt to save a relationship or favor or get back in favor of their wife. But at that point, it's all fallen on deaf ears. And it's coming from a place of external versus internal, that internal confidence. And like, wow, I'm good enough. Whether I'm in this relationship or not, I'm going to be okay. And I love myself for who I am. And I think for men, we talk about a lot of talk about men and mental health. And there's the chipping away of confidence from rejection. And a lot of it, as we get into this, is about how do we receive love growing up? How do we face rejection? Can we navigate conflict? And all these things start playing out in the patterns we run. And they play out in our intimate relationships, which may look different from our friendships and our business relationships. And there's something about our intimate relationships and how we give and receive love, that play out. And then we get stuck into running these patterns over and over again. And I think it takes a level of spiritual awakening or awareness to really unpack, like, what are the silent patterns that I'm running in my life here? Because consciously, we don't always see it. These things run at a level that we're not always aware of.
It seems like every relationship coach, healer, everybody, just about everybody I speak to in the divorce space or relationship space seems to agree that relationships are a spiritual problem. And I was not at all spiritual. I didn't even have a concept of it before I went through my divorce. And then I kept bumping into it. It just kept coming up over and over and over again to the point where I couldn't ignore it. It's almost like relationships are guiding you into this place where you need to focus on yourself and do the inner work. To me, that's what spirituality is looking at yourself and healing yourself and doing that inner work. So um I don't know I necessarily have a question there. It just, that's what popped up as you were talking and seems to be a pattern. So I imagine, given that you said spirituality, that you guide a lot of people into that inner work.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the end game is getting to a point where can I look at myself in a way that's neutral, non-judgmental, but also non-defensive, and can I see the patterns that I'm running in my life? And I know for me, Jeff, like that made the biggest difference because I was younger when I got married the first time, and I came out of that with no kids. And as soon as I was free from that relationship, it was like I just kind of took off and just took action. I'm gonna go do life in a big way. And so I went about accomplishing things versus being and try to fill my bucket with big goals. And it worked for a while. And then I got into another relationship. And then over the years, the same patterns started to emerge because I never really figured out like what happened that first time around. And yeah, I was younger, but I saw these patterns playing out where, I mean, the rift in the relationship was almost identical the second time. So it would have been easy for me to be like, well, it's their fault. They don't want me. But I had to look at it and be like, wow, this is the second time this happened to me. I need to look at this and what is going on for me and why am I attracting the certain type of person into my life and then running the same patterns and the same breakup. Yeah, I think that what I feel is important for men is to be able to pull into that, realm and take some space and really look at how do they how are they operating in their relationship? Like what is true? And what was true for me was I avoided conflict like the plague. I gave away a lot of myself, so I felt incomplete, not in a way so it's sort of unfulfilled. And this is really weird self-fulfilling prophecy when we give out our love and energy and to a point we're not filling our own bucket, we're empty. And I probably lost a lot of love for myself, and we can only be loved to the capacity that we love ourselves. I feel like that's something that's eternal. And so for men is to start there, getting some of that self-love back, right? Interrupting the pattern and taking a look at like, who are you? Where is that? When did you love yourself in the past? And how can we get back to that place of love and acceptance and start moving forward and creating new patterns in our life and our relationships?
So why aren't we? So first of all, happy wife, happy life isn't a thing.
No, no.
So when you put somebody on the pedestal, you're trapping them. You're trapping them up
Mhm.
there. You're putting them in a jail so that all they have to do is look down on you. How do you swing from those extremes to finding that middle ground? And what's some ways to start to go down that path?
Yeah, I think one is curiosity about the person you're with. How do they tick? How do they operate? You mentioned that the person who leaves after an argument for 24 hours. That might work for some people. For a small
In the
percentage of
short
people,
term.
you have someone who has abandonment issues. That's like a death sentence. So understanding where your partner is coming from and having an agreements in place. Fortunate, like my partner Janae, she's amazing. When we started our relationship over 6 years ago, we were just very conscious about how we were going to do this. We want to do this right and slow and with intention. So we have agreements. If there's something sticky we can't get through, we'll take some space, but we have agreed a time we're going to check back in. Hey, give me an hour. I need to go for a walk. Let's talk when I get back. Because there's both certainty that we're gonna come back to the issue. We're there for each other, no matter how hard things are. There's still love and respect for each other. So I think one again, getting curious about how our partner operates, and then setting up agreements around that feel good for both people.
Why do we have that? Why do so many men? Because you brought it up that we avoid conflict and that we we're not getting love. And I imagine both of those are patterns. And so to me, patterns, you repeat patterns, obviously, that's why they're called patterns, but that pattern came from further down the line in their life often. What are you finding are some common reasons for those patterns to be there? Why are so many men suffering from not getting enough love?
If you look into the past, we had a group of people. My parents were baby boomers, so their parents were fought in World War II or went through the Great Depression. There's a lot of trauma that was circled around that. There's, again, my example is, came from part of my family was Irish. They immigrated here after the potato famine. There's a lot of alcoholism in the family, and along with alcoholism, there's abuse. And so, how do you avoid that? You try to be the good boy. You try to do everything right, so you avoid anger or punishment. And obviously, there's a different culture. I don't know how kids were raised, but I know for me, mine was, I wanted to avoid my dad's anger. And granted, I always had this view of like our parents did the best they could with the resources they had at that time in life. And he did his best to not repeat patterns that happened to him. But it wasn't 100%. Like he still had demons that he was dealing with. And so our thing was, we don't want to make dad mad. So I just became the kid who, straight A student, didn't get in trouble. A girl one time called me a parent's wet dream, which didn't work out very well when you're in high school and college. So, I think there's a lot of us from that era and that generation, the latchkey kids who didn't want to cause trouble. All right. We knew that the troublemakers, there's those of us that avoided it at all cost. So that and I know I'm not alone. Talking to enough men, I'm not alone in this.
I'm finding there's a lot of anger towards boomers these days, and I was asking that question very delicately to not be too pointed, but you put your finger right on it where I was going.
Yeah. I'm curious for you, what when you say that, what comes up for you in regards to that generation?
I remember recently telling my father to, not to speak to me in a certain way. And he said, this is the way my father spoke to me, so this is the way I'm going to speak to you. And that I can't get much clearer on generational trauma right there. There's a saying, you don't have to finish it, but you can't abstain from the work. So it's your job, it's your obligation to do better than the previous generation. And yeah, you're gonna get scars, but you gotta face yourself. And I can point to all kinds of places where I screwed up with my kids, but all you can do is do better. Do better the next time, do better and learn from it.
I always think it's kind of funny having kids in a way. It's like you're gonna screw up. Like you're just going into there's things that come up raising kids and having these relationship wounds, and you don't know it until it's right in front of you. And there's always I was the same way. I have two boys who are older and a stepdaughter who's 8. With her, I'm like the most patient person in the world. Because I've learned a lot over the years, and I wasn't always that way. And I was like, oh, I wish I could have been more patient or less irritated. But these are all the things that you're talking about, the way, like your dad talking to you in that frame or that tone. And, it's almost like, well, I turned out fine. You hear this a lot. It was okay for me, so it's going to be okay for you. Well, it's not really okay. Or
Yeah.
there's a better way to do it, I should say. There's a better way to communicate. And I think once your eyes are open to that, it's sort of life changing because you don't know what you don't know. And once you become open to it, it's like, oh wow, there's a whole new world of how people communicate and what's normal in a family or family system, or what's acceptable in a relationship, or even like what's possible in a relationship. And that was a key for me. I started seeing like, wow, I had all these relationships my whole life that kind of ran in a certain way. There's a certain current to it. And now after doing that work, it's like a light bulb came on. It's like, oh, this is amazing. This is what almost like a relationship is designed to be. And I had no clue for most of my life what that looked like internally.
And that's what those relationships do, because that mirror can be really intense.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just feeling into that a little bit. It is intense. Love is intense, and it's hard to, I mean, I still feel it now where I want to cut off sometimes on how I feel because it's almost like, it's too much or I'm too vulnerable. Janae can even pick up on it too. And she wants me to hang a little bit longer with that feeling or that intensity. And I think, you know, I, there's stuff that we can become aware of and we can heal, but I don't think we're ever going to be 100%. Right? It's like this part of me is 100% healed. Whenever someone tells me that, I know it's bullshit. It's just like these things that were hardwired into us, we can just handle it better. We're more aware of it, and there's more of a gap between a reaction and a response, like how we feel, and then we can choose how we want to respond with things. But there is an intensity about it that's, we're going to have our reaction. It's going to bubble up, and what we do with it is what makes all the difference. Can we, like on it, both good and bad, I hate to label good and bad, but positive, or emotions, so like that loving feeling, or, feeling joy and tears are coming out of your eyes and you're just so joyful. And then on the other side of like that anger and frustration, and being able to hang with those emotions without, and even though it's really uncomfortable, then how we respond, did we pull away, withdraw? Like that was my MO. Even on those good feelings, I didn't want to show too much of myself. There's a shield, of being vulnerable, too vulnerable. And on the other side of like not letting my, not wanting to be angry. So I just kind of like, I stuffed it down. Right. And I feel like, especially when there's a push against like this toxic masculinity, it's almost like, I think there's a lot of guys who are either over the top, they're too, it gets stuffed down that comes out sideways, or, they're not allowed to express this side of them. Because we don't want to make our partner afraid, or, I don't know, there's a stigma there, Jeff, like, especially in today's world where I think men get caught in the middle of where am I emoting too much, not enough, and we just become almost like robots in a way. It's a trap, like it's not sort of in the subconscious.
That
I'm
sounds
rambling
like
a little bit here, but I wasn't sure if I was making sense there.
toxic masculinity. Can you define that for me? Because I get so many, I hear one side or the other is toxic masculinity. Tell me what it is.
To me, it's when the ego is leading, and it's that leading with control and force versus love. There's something toxic about that. Is the nice soft guy who on the outside he's all rainbows and unicorns, but on the inside, there's anger and there's resentment that's built up, that usually comes out sideways. And I see this a lot where, deep into a relationship where that bubble gets burst over time, because when you're in an intimate relationship, the truth is going to be revealed of who this person is that you're with. It can't be avoided. So the toxic masculinity is actually a lack of masculinity in my mind.
Glad you said that. I think there's a lot of people who say aggressive men are just in general, maybe I've just been hanging around on the wrong corners of the internet, but aggressive men in general are toxic. And I don't know if I agree with that necessarily. There's a time and place. But if you're aggressive overall, yeah, maybe. I guess there's a lot of nuance there. And I think it takes a lot of tuning to find that place. I don't think I found that place until my mid 40s.
I learned this from a good mentor. He's like, when you're asked what you want for dinner, just pick something. Don't say whatever you want. It's like the kiss of death. Just make a decision and know it's probably going to be wrong, and you can adjust accordingly. But what he was trying to convey to me was part of this of the masculinity and being a leader in your family is you make the decision, and develop this trust with your partner that she's leaning on you in a certain way, right? So I think what happens is, and this is what I've seen working with couples, is that there are a lot of women who have total decision fatigue, and they don't necessarily want to be responsible for everything. And these are subtle things in life. Right? We're not talking about the big, make a decision about buying a house or things like that. But there's a certain level of leadership that we've given away where everything is now 50-50, or we've got roles have blended over the years. And there's some great things about that, but I also think we don't have as much give and take, or more of, again, like the masculine frame of like, this is where I'm going to lead our family, and these small decisions to take something off, my wife's plate. I mean, she's making decisions about a lot of other things, and sometimes the last thing, she doesn't want more, and she loves it when I just make a plan, because she'll tell me if she doesn't really love the plan, but just make it, and then we'll adjust accordingly.
It takes a lot of confidence to even get to that place, because you might be wrong. Not wrong. I don't mean that. You might have a differing opinion from her, and that might feel like you're wrong. So being able to just sit in that takes a certain amount of confidence.
Yeah, it's being able to handle a level of rejection, right? So the idea you throw out there might get rejected,
Mm-hmm.
and understanding that being rejected doesn't mean not being loved.
Mm.
and separating those two. And again, I'll always go back to, what did that look like as a child? When were you rejected in love as a child? Where your bids of connection, weren't met, your needs weren't met. Replay those out, and I fall into that trap too, where sometimes like I want Janae's opinion, or I want her reassurance, versus I know deep down, I know she just wants me to make a decision here, so I'm just going to do it. If she doesn't like my plan, I trust that she's going to tell me and speak her truth. Like, that's sort of our agreement, that we don't need to guess what each other's thinking. But it took some time to get there, to realize like, okay, I can make a decision. She'll tell me if she doesn't necessarily agree, and we can pivot without feeling like I'm wrong or rejected or unlovable just because I chose a path that was quote unquote incorrect. Like you said, there's no right or wrong to it. Is that the direction we want to go? But the more I do that, the more she trusts me. So it's this intuitive thing of, hey, the more I lead, the more she gives into that and trusts me in that. But if I don't, I'll never really know. It's like I don't have that feedback to know what works for her and what she needs from me. So the only way to do that is sort of lead forward and adjust accordingly. And I think it's like any great leader in business. Like, not everything is going to work out. Not every decision you make is going to be the home run, but it's learning how to pivot with each other, talk through those things, and what are the needs and how can we meet that? And it might be like, Scott, I don't care what decision you make in regards to, buying a car, let's say, long as I know you're gonna, I'm loved and cherished, and you're gonna keep me in mind, or these are my requirements. I don't care that you figure out the rest. There's something about that trust that's built over time in that way, but it takes being able to get out of ourselves and have that confidence to make a choice.
So you're buying the Ferrari.
100%. Yeah, we're in tomorrow. Yeah.
I find that she brings a certain color into my life that I wouldn't have just on my own. And if I led everything, then neither of us would see that color. But if she leads in some capacities, like on the weekend, she said, let's go down to the beach. Wonderful idea. Whereas I might have just sat here and worked. I find that's a fine line to ride, but it's very rewarding to find that.
Yeah. One thing I think that took off in the last few years, maybe I don't see as much out on the internet now, is just the whole polarity thing, masculine, feminine energy. Because that's all going to shift depending on where you're at in life. And, I love that. It's like, to me, that's the relationship that you're talking about. And it's sort of like this mature, evolved relationship where you take turns, and depending on what area of life you're in, someone might take, Janae takes the lead on certain things and I might on others. And it's not static. We don't stay in our box or stay in our lane. And I feel like the whole masculine, feminine polarity movement that came out, I remember Tony Robbins talking about this like 25 years ago. When it started getting this grassroots, and it's like, men need to be this and women need to be this. And, obviously the internet simplifies everything. So we start going into black and white. Life isn't static like that. It evolves, and there's, and learning how to, what are the nuances of each individual, in polarity. There's times where, Janae will carry the load when I'm like totally tapped out, and vice versa. And, like, to say, I think it's sort of like unevolved thinking to stay in those lanes where life is, there's more play and there's more interaction. That's what makes it great. That's what makes a relationship alive.
Oh, I like that. Yeah. And that's what a relationship should be. It should be alive. And I think back to all the relationships I had before, and it's like toxic on one side or the other, or very dead. To go back to your original point, I don't know that a good relationship was ever modeled to me. I think I had a relationship growing up where someone was always struggling to be on top. That's not a relationship. I don't know what that is, dictatorship. So, no wonder I failed at my first marriage. That's what was modeled to me.
My dad had a saying, it was his way or the highway, very similar approach. And
Yeah.
what's interesting is, you can take one choice. You can model his behavior or model the other side. And so I went to the other direction. So I was with people who were more dominant, and it was their way or the highway. And I just kind of went along for the ride. And that's where I feel I gave up a lot of myself, because I was like, okay, it's there. I let them have the decision because I thought that would make them happy, but they didn't want that. They wanted more interaction. They wanted more of me, and I just wasn't willing to offer it subconsciously. And again, that's where I need to take responsibility for these failed relationships. They came in a certain way and I came in a certain way, but it's really up to me to figure out like what what was my part in all this? And how can I, again, like we talked about at the beginning, how can I interrupt that pattern going forward?
Yeah, responsibility. How do you take responsibility? How do you even find what your part is? Let me tell a quick story. So my way or the highway, that's what I grew up with. And then I got married to that. And I always found it so frustrating, and I get really angry at it because it was always my way or the highway. So I think for a lot of the time I felt like a victim in that, because when you get told no over and over again, you have to go, you almost are forced into victim mode. So, how do you find responsibility in that scenario?
Yeah, I think one is, if we're doing it from today, it would be you need to get quiet. And whether it's meditation or prayer or stillness, getting really still and asking the right questions. Because it really comes from responsibility comes from that awareness of what is my part in all this. That's the sort of the question. Yeah, and I love, like, I don't know if Jocko Willink, the former Navy SEAL, extreme ownership. I'm 100% responsible, which I think can work to a point, and then realize, well, there are two people here, and it's not necessarily falling on the sword, but how did I contribute? Where did I push people? Where did I push the person I love away? What is the behavior that where they didn't feel loved? And it might be you maybe get the gift of getting that feedback, and sometimes it's a little bit harsh, but criticism, there's an element of feedback there when we get past the tone or the cutting words. But what are the things that this person has said that might be true? What if all these things are criticizing me about, instead of me getting defensive, I actually took it in and listened? What is the truth in there? Because I always feel like there is that feedback, there is that truth in what our partner's saying, even if it's hurtful to hear. And starting there and then asking myself, like, is that, like, what is the truth? Like, how did I show up? How do I want to show up in a relationship? What's the difference here? And just letting that play and sit and see, again, like, what am I responsible for? And I think the more, again, it's one of those things, the more we do it, the easier it becomes. You can start seeing, Jeff, like, you probably can see, like, 30 years ago, the things you did that pushed love away in your relationships or your marriage. What those patterns start showing up, and you can start seeing it more and more. I mean, and again, and not also, I think the big part about responsibility is, like, sometimes these are the things we inherited. We're not necessarily, we can be responsible for, maybe we're not responsible for how it, that behavior came out of us, but we're responsible for changing it down the road. Because once we become aware, then it's our responsibility to make that change for ourselves.
So, bring up awareness. Obviously, is the first step to fixing it. And to get there, to learn to be quiet. And I agree, there's this uncomfortable part, though, where you learn to put your ego aside. And that can be really frustrating, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, to say, to look at a relationship that's failed and ask yourself, like, how did I contribute to this? I think it's a really hard thing to do. Our ego wants to defend ourselves all the time. They're probably my most frustrating couples I've worked with. So Janae and I will work with couples 2-on-2 a lot of the time when I'm not working on with men 1-on-1. But a lot of it is that ego fighting to, for what they almost fight for their own dysfunction, if that makes sense. They want to defend why they're doing the things they do versus just being able to take it in and realize, like, this is not helping our relationship. The way I'm behaving or reacting is pushing the person I love further away versus pulling them in closer. Like, that's dysfunction, right? A behavior that pushes away versus pulls us closer together. And people want to hang on to that and defend themselves. And for the people who are most successful couples in regards to staying together, the ones that can drop their ego and drop their defenses and really examine themselves and understand, like, there's a point they don't need to take it personally, because it was never theirs to begin with. Like, that behavior you were inherited, right, down this lineage, and all our family's traumas, and that came down from all the lines. There's, all that stuff was passed down, all that dysfunction, and here you are today. And the great part is, you don't have, like, that's not yours if you choose so. You can drop that today.
Well, the ego is incredibly strong. It doesn't want to die. If it's pushing back, it's struggling to stay alive. And I imagine that's where you come in, is as that coach, you're holding up that mirror and saying, it's okay to drop your ego. This is where your ego is showing up, and it's okay to drop your ego. It's safe.
Yeah. I think one is letting them know it's okay. And two, looking at the impact of, like, is this behavior serving you? even though your ego wants to defend it, are you really going to get what you want by continuing in this way? You know, some people, I would say when you get to that point, most people can. They realize they need to make a change. Some would just get stuck and they just can't let go. They can't see how they've contributed to the problem. Or they don't, I mean, deep down, they don't want to be able to see that, look in that mirror. But, is that impact of their behavior, and what do you really want? Like, do you want a relationship that's loving and caring, or do you want to carry this burden with you and this resentment for the rest of your life? I mean, and then when you boil it down to, that's kind of what it comes down to. That's what it is. That's what we're holding in our hands, of these decisions. But it's a lot of work to get there. It's a lot of work to let some of these things go that we've been carrying around for a long time.
What are some things you look for when a couple comes to see you, and I imagine their question underneath everything is, can we make this work? What are some things you look for to answer that?
Yeah, one, how much are they putting on the other person is a quick, the more they put on someone else, the harder that's going to be to make it work. They're not willing to look at themselves. So, we're going to filter people before they get in front of us. And are they willing to really examine themselves? Do they really want to make this work? And, asking those questions ahead of time. But I think it comes down to that level of awareness. One of the toughest ones to crack are the ones that think they're already healed. I mean, they're just like, I'm good. I fixed myself. And it's like, oh, well, if you did, you probably wouldn't be here today. But usually it's, I fixed myself, he needs to fix himself, or she needs to fix herself. That's where we usually get stuck with couples sometimes, or they talk about like his truth versus her truth. But really, when we want to get down to the patterns, like the deeper issues versus the arguments, what's on the top. The wound's a lot deeper. We want to get below, who's mad at who for not doing the dishes. It's like, what are the deeper patterns what are the arguments you repeat over and over again over different topics? So we just look for, like, can you be aware of your own behaviors and your own patterns enough to the point where you start realizing the impact that has on this person that you love. I do feel like it's never about love. It's usually about, I would almost say, like, respect is more important than love, because we seldom hurt the person we respect, but we will always hurt the person we love, or a lot of people do, right? And getting that, like, do you respect this person and their nervous system and their way of being enough to adapt and adjust, right? Your behaviors to make this thing work. Because I don't think people realize the impact that they have on their behaviors might have on another person, and the hurt they cause, because a lot of times we keep it locked in, or we don't want to admit it. And when I say we, I'm talking about, couples in general that struggle. And some people are like, wow, I didn't realize the impact that I had on this person by, withdrawing from an argument. I didn't realize that made them feel abandoned and unloved. And you start unpacking these origin stories of their relationship and parental relationship and their childhood, and you can just see how it's all unfolded for them. And I think a lot of people, once they see it, they get it. It's like, okay, this is how I behaved. It's not my behavior, but I'm going to stop this. I'm going to stop doing this because I know the impact that it's had on, for me, it's Janae, like, I don't want to hurt her, so I'm going to shift my behavior. And there are times where it's like every cell in my body screaming to go back to my old way. And I just got to hang in there a little bit longer and be conscious of, okay, I got to hang with her. I can't withdraw from this conversation. Even though it's really uncomfortable, I got to stay with it a little bit longer for her.
I imagine, though, there has to be a balance. I was thinking about myself. I withdraw, whereas my wife attaches. So sometimes that can lead to situations where I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this anymore right now. I need time. And she's like coming at me. And it's like, in that moment, it becomes whose needs win out. And what we arrived at was, maybe we say, I need an hour, I need a day, whatever it is, but we'll come back to this. And then that's still rooted in love and respect, but it's not, but then both of our needs are getting met. So as you work with couples, and I know you work with men and your wife works with women, but what's the biggest difference between how men and women handle those relationship struggles?
I feel like men were problem solvers, tend to be more problem solvers. They want tangible actions, and they don't want to. And this is where I feel like traditional therapy or couples counseling really can let men down. because most of them don't want to sit there and process. It's like a death sentence. The old school, we're going to process our emotions, we're going to talk about our problems, and for women, traditionally that's a way of connection. For men, it's like I need to be able to do something. And I think so when it comes to relationships, for one, I think with men is to give them some strategies to use. It's like, we got to change the energy of this relationship. Here are things that you can do we're going to do something every single day to start shifting the energy. And a lot of it is around gratitude and appreciation and, letting their wives feel seen and heard and appreciated. So there's certain strategies that, like, hey, here's this thing, go take action. So I think that's a big part of it, and getting out of, when it comes to actual sitting with couples, getting out of talking about the problems, because they're never ending. And there's usually two people with different perspectives, and and I think it can be helpful in some ways, but let's get down to what are the real issues. And a lot of it's also just lack of connection. We had a couple that they were like right on the brink of divorce and just about had it with each other. And they had really young kids, like, toddlers. And one thing that really helped them was 15 minutes a day of just sitting together, like just the two of them, and being able to connect and slow down and breathe together. Because most of our communication problems are connection problems first. Because, like most couples, they're great at communicating when they start out, and all the stuff gets in the middle, and suddenly, like, they can't communicate. Well, it's not that they can't communicate, it's just that a lot of emotion gets in the way of their words. And the words are only like 8% of how we communicate. So, our somatically is much more powerful. So getting couples to slow down with each other, even for like 10 or 15 minutes a day to connect. One of our things is connection over communication, because connection issues solve a lot of communication issues. And coming from that relaxed state where their nervous systems can relax into each other versus being vigilant, and looking for the problem, is where a lot of, you know, healing can take place in that regard, and feelings start coming back, and they feel closer together. And that's ultimately the objective. A lot of couples go into therapy and they talk about problems for an hour and they walk out feeling worse than they did when they walked in. So I think for men and women, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but there is something there of like giving men something to do to feel like they're taking action towards their relationship versus just talking about the problems, and sort of finding that middle ground of like what's really important for the two of them.
You said, but I won't ask that. I was going to talk about rituals. I don't know quite how to ask that, but you kind of mentioned earlier ritual, or you didn't use the word rituals, but you said something to do every day, and I think of that as rituals. What are some other ones that you suggest?
Yeah, as far as like rituals or
Yeah, like
yeah.
adding new rituals to your. I think it's easier for men to think of them as rituals. I'll check this off my list every day.
Yeah, actually I love it because that's what we talk a lot about our rituals too, which I think sometimes it gets caught in like the woo woo sometimes, like, or it's too woo. But yeah, it's like, so what are the rituals where we can honor each other? I mean, so one thing Janae and I did at the beginning of our relationship was before we go to bed at night, no matter where we started off long distance, so a lot of times it was text or phone. Was what are three things that we appreciate about the other person that day? Very specific. So it's not like, oh, you're a good mom. It's like, oh wow, when you brought my cup of coffee over, I really appreciated that. Made me feel seen, right? Or just these little small things in life, like the beautiful parts of these relationships that we tend to overlook, is grounding ourselves back into appreciation. So that would be like one ritual for us. We would do that before bed every single night. And then, like Janae does a thing she used to, or she doesn't do it all the time now, but she would put toothpaste on my toothbrush if she went in before me at night. And right, it's just a ritual that says, hey, I'm thinking about you and I love you. It's so small and simple, but it's so sweet. And again, these are things we couples get away from, but incorporating these new rituals into our lives, and they're probably going to be uncomfortable. Actually, I know they're going to be uncomfortable because they're even uncomfortable for me at the beginning, and I had a hard time with it. It's vulnerable. It's a new way of communicating. And again, once we do it, we get into that routine, and it's like, wow, this is really special. And now we can talk about that to other people and the impact it's had on our relationship, because we stay in that place of gratitude most of the time. I'd say, majority of the time, we're so grateful for each other and what we have, but it's cultivated.
Yeah, and I like that you say communication, because it totally is, and nobody else in the world is going to put your toothpaste on your toothbrush for you.
Yeah.
What about the other way? I asked a few minutes ago, can we make this work? Other than lack of respect, but maybe that's the answer. What are some signs that they're not going to make it work? Because I think of my ex, and after all the work I've done, there's no way that relationship would work even now.
Yeah, I think if, one, are people willing to do the things that we ask them to do, right? So that's a simple one. Can they follow through? I've had guys like, hey, drop a sticky note every day somewhere that she can see that some sort of appreciation, right? Something about her. After 2 days, he quit because it was too uncomfortable. His wife really appreciated it, and of course, she was like a little bit. She was kind of shit testing a little bit, like, does he really mean it? Or, it was like, but this stuff takes time, and maybe not a lot of time, 30, 60 days, but it's the consistency until it feels comfortable. And, I don't want to say fake it till you make it, but sometimes you gotta generate new energy in the relationship. And if you're unwilling to try something new, then we're just going to be talking about problems the whole time. And there's couples that just, they like getting stuck in feeling in that conflict, because we connect through conflict too, and that's where people get stuck in it. Like, there's like the 6 human needs, right? And there's a way to conflict is a connection, right? When there's nothing else, it's why sometimes you'll see if someone's sort of stoic, you'll see maybe the wife or the husband like peck at them. They're looking for a reaction, they're looking for emotion. So I don't mind anger as much as I do when someone comes to me and they're just like, non-reactive, like indifferent. That's the death knell right there. Indifference, like when you just don't care anymore. Someone mentioned to me once, like, if there's anger and emotion, like that's like water running through a river, and we can redirect it. But when there's nothing and when there's no emotion, it's hard to rekindle.
So if I can restate that, I just want to make sure I get it right. What came to mind is the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference.
Yeah.
So if you've got that anger going through a relationship, it's a matter of revitalizing that energy. And sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't. I'm still thinking about my ex, and I don't know if that would ever have worked. But you're almost transmuting that energy into something more positive. And you do that through small rituals like that starts to shift the energy, and small habits turn into bigger habits. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think what is the anger? It's that frustration. We want something more than what we have. And, that emotion is there. We can, anger is not necessarily a bad thing. I think, we kind of, a lot of people again have over the years is kind of the stigma about that anger is bad, but anger can be a good thing if we use it correctly. And how many times have we accomplished something because we had some anger in us and wanted to prove a point or prove someone wrong, or we're mad at our situation and wanted to change it. So the anger is very powerful if it's used in the right way, and not, it's more about the situation versus the person. Going from I'm angry at her to, well, I'm angry at this situation, and where we're at right now in our marriage, I want to use that anger to create something different. Because that's energy to start drive. That's a catalyst for change right there.
Somebody said that a lot of the time, well, where we got to in the conversation was a lot of the time anger is a cover up for something else. So some need not getting met. So anger is just the first step, and then there's something underneath that. So keep going through anger until you hit that whatever it's covering up.
Yeah, I think I've usually heard that anger is a cover up for frustration. It's like but yeah, I agree with you. Definitely a cover up. There's something more subtle underneath of
Well, it
that.
could be hurt.
That's true. Yeah.
And I was thinking about myself recently. I had to sit with a lot of anger. Like, I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and underneath, I realized it was grief. It was grief over losing a friendship. So it's not necessarily any one thing. I think it's really particular to the circumstance. I could be
Yeah.
wrong.
I like that approach for sure.
You're out with some friends. And it's the end of the night, and you got like 30 seconds left until the guy's Uber is showing up, and he goes to you, man, I've been having trouble with my marriage. What's the one piece of advice you give him before his Uber comes?
I would think it's, what do you love about her and what are you grateful for? I mean, we can find that direction, that one shift to see what we have versus what we don't have is the beginning of revitalizing our relationships. I mean, it's all so easy to look at what we don't have in this world and what we think we're missing And when we're not looking at, oftentimes the solution's right in front of our face and what we really want, it just takes a little bit of effort. And there's, it's the whole grass is greener where we water it. But I feel like remembering what we love about, there's a reason you fell in love in the first place. And what is that about this person? And what can we be grateful for about them today?
One last question for you. You've been through 2 divorces, 2 married, third marriage. That's a hell of a journey, and that's quite the mountain to climb. What's one thing you're grateful for having gone through all of that?
Yeah, I can almost feel like a little emotion coming up just in that question, Jeff, because I'm so grateful that I've learned the things that I learned to have the relationship I have today. I'm so grateful for having a partner like Janae, where we're just so aligned. And I don't know if I would have got there without the lessons that I learned along the way. I mean, to feel this level of love, both giving and receiving. I mean, it really is incredible, and I'm really, really grateful for that. We're grateful for each other every day, and I mean, I wouldn't trade all the hardships away. If I just knowing it's all worth it, going through all the heartbreak and the hardships and coming to this point. I mean, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Beautiful.